Hey everyone, how are you? How is it going? This is the live that I wanted to do, particularly for the eating window, because I know that I've been getting a lot of comments from people in the community who are interested in knowing how it actually works. So, I put together a few of the comments that I received, and I wrote down a few of my own notes because I just wanted to make sure that I'm touching on the issues that many of the women in the community are addressing. Okay. So the main issue is about the eating window and how it accelerates fat loss. The other issue is, can we adjust the eating window? Are we basically set at the eating window that we commit to in the way beginning, or can we vary it? So those are the issues that I kind of want to talk about. Also, what types of foods are actually allowed or permitted during the eating window? When it's your time to feast, um, are you able to open up Pandora's box and eat all the things that you want to eat? Do you have to consider calories? Do you not have to consider calories? Can you eat sugar? Can you not eat sugar? Um, is fat an issue? Good fat versus bad fat. Some of the details we're not going to necessarily go into during this session, but the biggest concerns I think that the community is having, which is, how do I adjust my eating window based on my needs, are the types of questions that I want to get to. But before I begin with that, um, I just want to thank all of you for joining the community because it has gotten much bigger than what I expected it would be at this point, anyway. Before we went into the holidays, roughly around Christmas, we had the Lose Sugar, Lose Fat Detox live workshops. And during that time, we had roughly 1,000 subscribers. Like, I know one of the calls, I wanted to sort of celebrate that we had reached that goal. And now, shortly after the new year, we're at over 5,000 subscribers. So I'm really excited about that. I know that means that a lot of women are able to resonate with the information that they're finding on my channel, and maybe even able to resonate with a lot of those issues that women are commenting about. I have the feeling that there's a lot of sort of sharing going on, exchange. So that's really important in order to support and encourage one another. So I'm excited about that. And I just want to thank you for your support. And I really hope that we can continue to grow and share with one another, inform one another. And I think that's really the goal, to reach, our results that we're striving for, to be able to, share the information with one another and apply it for our particular individual cases. Okay, so the first thing I wanted to just mention about intermittent fasting, or the eating window, right? The eating window is basically part of the cycle that you have of, the intermittent fasting method. So the intermittent fasting method is basically a fasting method that is used widely among many, many, not just women, but men even, because it has proven to not just be useful for losing fat, but also for increasing health, improving health, basically on a cellular level. So the intermittent fasting window is divided into an eating phase and a fasting phase. And depending on your choice of eating window, how long you want your eating window to be or how short, the fasting cycle will have an impact then on your health, but also on your fat loss goals. Because if you are fasting for 12 hours as opposed to 16 hours, your fat loss results may not come as quickly as someone who is fasting much longer. So the intermittent fasting method what you choose and the times that you choose really will affect how quickly you reach your results and the impact it has on your fat loss and also on your health. So I just wanted to start by saying with intermittent fasting, it was discovered by a doctor who was able to prove that at 16 hours, right, starting at 16 hours fasting time, so absence of food or absence of glucose or blood sugar, that at that point, you are able to step into the autophagy phase, which means your cells are able to detoxify or to sort of repair those damaged cells that are dysfunctional. And that was really key. That was really important for pushing autophagy or pushing this type of method, because it was able to, contribute to health. So from that, it was also demonstrated that the growth hormone would increase at a certain period of time, which is also 16 hours. Starting from this fasting cycle of 16 hours, the growth hormone increases. And that's really, really key, particularly for menopausal women, because the growth hormone is really important for our tissues, right? And for aging. So at the age of 30, the growth hormone actually stops producing. So when we're able to fast, at least starting at a 16-hour fasting cycle, then the growth hormone has demonstrated to increase. And this is really, really important for the menopausal woman, because it means that it slows down aging, which is really beneficial for us as we mature, to have that as a tool for not only fat loss, but also for cellular maintenance and for improving our health. So those are really key factors. And of course, another key factor of the 16-8 or the intermittent fasting method is losing fat, which is really the big reason for women in this community for doing the intermittent fasting, because you're able to accelerate fat loss, but really at a rate that's much quicker than maybe other methods that you've chosen, whether it's calorie restriction or any other types of dieting. The intermittent fasting method is really helpful for getting quicker to your fat loss results. But what I find very helpful about the 16/8 method or intermittent fasting in general, because it's not just 16/8, that's just what most women choose to implement and in their lifestyle, is this 16/8 method, so 16 hours of fasting and 8-hour eating window. But really, there are all different types of methods. You can have a shorter eating window or a smaller eating window or a larger eating window. But the important thing to me is that for this particular community, for women who are maybe just starting with fasting, who are not familiar with fasting, then doing it with the 16/8 is really convenient, because you can easily fit it into your lifestyle without having to uproot all of the activities that you currently are engaged in, which is really, really key. Why? because you want to be consistent with your fat loss journey, right? There's so many people who have engaged in fat loss methods, started, and then had to stop. Why? Because it wasn't sustainable. So the sustainability of any activity or any fat loss tool that you use is very important for you to continue with it. Because once you have a system that you can rely on, that you can stick with, then you're more likely to reach your goal than if you did something that was completely extreme that you couldn't maintain or uphold. So that's why I find intermittent fasting so genius, because it's so easy for the average woman to implement in their current lifestyle. And particularly for Black menopausal women, because we are, as I say in most of my content, we're at higher risk for insulin resistance. We're also at higher risk for obesity, for a number of chronic diseases, heart disease, for diabetes. So because we're disproportionately affected by these metabolic related diseases, it's important for us to understand and be aware of how helpful intermittent fasting can be for our lifestyle, and to experiment with it. First to understand, maybe to get more information before we start with it, but really understand the impact that it can have on our health, and how much simpler it is than any other types of methods to not only address our fat loss issues, but also to impact our health. Okay, so when understanding intermittent fasting and why it's really key, because it's able to help us at a cellular level with cellular maintenance in terms of the autophagy. The autophagy actually kicks in starting at 16 hours or more, and also with benefiting our health in terms of the growth hormone, because it reverses aging or slows down aging, and also because of fat loss. So aside from those key factors, and it being very important for the menopausal woman because it easily integrates into our lifestyle, I find it very helpful because it's very flexible. You can adjust your eating habits, you can adjust your eating window based on your lifestyle, which is what I refer to as the sliding eating window, because it does not have to stay at a 16/8, but instead can adjust. And so I'm just going to check really quickly, stop right there for a minute, because there are a couple of people who have just checked in. Let's see, Pamela Cotton says, what can you drink during the fasting window other than water? That's a good question. Water obviously is a no-brainer because it adds no calories, there's no sugar, so there's no impact on the glucose. And it's good because water, we know, is helpful in terms of supporting ketosis. Without water, it would be very difficult to have an effective ketosis, or that's the fat burning pathway that allows your body to tap into your fat cells. Instead, you are then dehydrated and it slows down your progress. So water is really good. And it's just in general very important to have water throughout your day, to be hydrated with 2 to 3 liters. So that just, I'll put that out there, that as a basis. But what else can you drink? So in terms of liquids during your eating window, you really can consider all types of fluids that don't have, like I said, anything that can affect your glucose levels, right? Because as soon as your blood sugar starts to fluctuate, if it goes up in any way, anything that has a high glycemic index, or causes your blood sugar to spike, will then keep you in that glucose pathway, which you don't want. During your cycles, if you're in an eating window, then that's fine. Because you're talking about the fasting window, you can have what you choose to fast on. But once you're in the fasting window, then you really want to support that. And by doing that, you want to cut away those foods or ingredients that can affect your blood sugar. So anything that has, like I said, glucose in it. I was going to save it to later because there were women in the community who talked about, whether or not you can have sugar or if you can have sugar substitutes. And I was going to kind of talk about, what types of ingredients can affect your fasting window and your blood sugar in general. But I can talk about it now, that if you have even sugar substitutes, because a lot of people think that sugar substitutes are harmless. And in general, when it comes to calories, they are. In fact, they don't have any calories. They're not going to affect your calorie intake. But there are other factors, that take place, other biological processes that take place in our bodies that are affected by sugar substitutes because they are chemicals. They're actually, in most cases, sugar alcohols that affect our processes, that affect our hormones. And what has been studied and discussed and sort of looked into or explored is that these sugar substitutes are actually considered obesogens. And these obesogens are actually sort of chemicals that your body really doesn't know what to do with. And so instead of breaking them down and filtering them out of the body, they sort of hold on to them. And anything that your body is not able to break down and filter out, it holds on to and sort of you know, holds in our fat cells. So it kind of, gets backed up in our fat cells and adds to our weight gain. So that's a disadvantage for us if we eat long term too much of these chemicals or obesogens. There are a lot of different chemicals that fall into it. Dr. Mindy Pelz actually has a book called Fast Like a Girl. And in her book, she actually lists a number of different obesogens that are considered, a part of, this group that can actually be negative or work against our fat loss because they actually collect in our fat cells. And sugar substitutes is one of them. So I wouldn't consider that being a smart option during your fasting window. But instead, I would consider water, like I said, but also teas if you have herbal teas. There are teas out there that have, it's like a root, a sugar root that makes the tea sweet. You can find it in sort of these teas that have um, it's like an herbal or a fruit type tea. In Germany, it's ROOB Rohrbusch, ROOBOS. I don't know what it is in the US. I can't remember what it is. You're probably familiar with it, but it's a really good herbal tea that's really earthy, but also robust. And it is also sweet because of this sort of sugar root that's in there, but it's earthy. It's not sugar and it's not a sugar substitute. So it does satisfy the sweet tooth because I imagine that most of the women in this community, like me, have a sweet tooth, and most of the food that you're eating and that you're consuming, you want to have sweet, like a sweet taste. So I totally get it. I'm with you. If that is more of what you're looking for, then that is a good thing to look for. So I'm trying to figure out where I can post it, where you can know what this ingredient is, what I'm talking about, but it's not anything that is negative or that adds to your blood sugar. So it's like an herbal tea that you can drink that has this ingredient. But sodas, for example, that have zero sugar or light sugar, Coca-Cola Light, or caffeine-free sugar light, whatever those type of sodas are, those are sodas. drink them if you need to have them. If you need to have them to get over the hump and you want to enjoy them, then consider only that while you're enjoying it, right, that it can have a long-term effect on how your body processes the chemicals that are in it. So it may not necessarily be something that you want to continue drinking over time. It may be something that you just have as, a celebration dinner or during vacation or holidays or something. But I think long term or ongoing, your go-to drink definitely should be something that does not contain chemicals that could have an impact on your blood sugar or how your body processes the chemicals and therefore can work against your fat loss. Um, Coffee you can drink. You can drink coffee during your fasting window, but you want to consider during your fasting window, if you drink coffee, that you should have creamer in it that is full fat. There should not be any sugar in it. Now, if you opt to do the sugar free or the sugar substitute, then you know, uh, just consider what kind of impact it could have. It's a choice, and every woman is different and varies in terms of the impact that these types of chemicals or ingredients can have on our fat loss and our biological processes. But we do want to consider the information that's out there, know what impact it could have, and then experiment with it. Just see, how does it impact you? In terms of your health, it may not have like a really big impact in terms of chronic diseases or anything like this. But in terms of fat loss, it may hold on in your fat cells. It may also impact your hormones in some way. So you just want to be careful, be aware of these types of ingredients, and just sort of consider it in the choices that you make. That was completely long-winded. I didn't mean to go there. So I hope I answered your question. If not, you can come back. Okay, so Angie Mobley says, thanks for sharing good and relevant information. She also asked, does stevia fall in the same category of sugar substitutes? That's a very good question, because stevia is actually a sugar substitute that has been widely accepted. And a lot of people, I think, before other sugar substitutes, accept stevia as being one that is helpful, beneficial, safe. But I would consider any type of sugar substitute that is processed in any way to be something that you should consider to be something to be explored, yeah, to look into. Now, in terms of the information out there, stevia is not necessarily a dangerous sugar substitute. It's not necessarily something that we consider to be harmful for us, because there are tests done and studies done. Nonetheless, there are clinical experiences out there from various practices, from various practitioners who would consider that to be lumped into the sugar substitute category, and may not necessarily recommend that as being an ingredient to include long term or ongoing. The key for your nutrition is really to try and strive to have a stripped down nutrition. That means not clinging onto those items that are processed that will provide you with, a sweet, hit, or a salt hit, or, whatever these flavors are that we search for in order to, enjoy our food. I completely get it. I am so there in terms of wanting my food, all that I eat, to be pleasurable, to be tasty. It's so important to be tasty for me, to be rich or decadent or fulfilling. That's so important. But at the same time, our um, what we should be striving for, what is what I want to say, is to try and get those foods that are really whole foods, that are in their natural package, that don't consist of a lot of processing. Now, there is a range, there is a spectrum of ultra processed and whole foods. And within that range, we go up to processed and then completely ultra processed. Now, the ultra processed is those foods you look at, they're in a package. Now, there are a lot of packaged foods that we have that are processed, but are not necessarily ultra processed. The ultra processed are definitely packaged. They're maybe even green or purple or blue in color. They have chemicals and food color and all types of ingredients. And if you look at the actual label and you see the listing of ingredients, it may include a lot of things that we can't even pronounce. Those are the foods that we really want to stay away from. When it comes to the other foods, if you have like a coffee with a fat creamer, whole fat creamer, that's good during your fasting window. And that's good in general in terms of eating or consuming because, you know, coffee or caffeine, okay, there are other maybe arguments about the impact that it may have on our hormones and our sleep and all that. But in terms of our fasting window and the impact that it may have on our fat loss, then that's a good combination during our fasting window. So coffee and fat creamer is okay. Now, in terms of adding a substitute sugar, if you need to do that to get over the hump, do it. Just do it. Just do it and see what happens. But be aware of the impact it could have and just monitor it. Monitor it and see where it goes. If you're having any impacts on your body, bloating or skin issues or, any other reactions that can come from that. I think that's really important because it's an individual issue. At the same time, there may be studies done, and you want to be aware of that as well. But you also want to be realistic and you want to be authentic and you want to enjoy the food that you have and that you eat and that you incorporate in your eating window because you want to be able to eat and put together a nutrition plan that is sustainable long term so that you can reach your goals. And I think if you have stevia in your diet or in your food, then it's not something that you really have to worry about too much compared to other ingredients, I would say. There are other ingredients I would worry about before I would worry about how much stevia you're having. I would just consider it long term and how much you're having, and how much you rely on it. Maybe if it's just for your coffee, then that's fine, and if you have it like me, a certain period of time or maybe, so and so much during a week, then it's okay. Okay. So, Angela Mobley says, thanks. I still like herbal tea without sweetener, but prefer lemon in it. Great. Okay, so I think I went a little bit off track and I apologize for that. I just want to kind of come back because the most important thing that I wanted to address was the eating window and how you can switch up. Now, I'm going to try and speed this up a little bit, but stick to the points that community members had raised, which was the first one being, can you switch up the times of an eating window? Yes, you can. Now, in my mini fat loss course, I talk about a regulated eating window. That's a sliding eating window that I refer to. And in this eating window, you have a fit, what I refer to as a fit in my course. And it's called the food intake timeline. And the food intake timeline has a start and an end time. That's the beginning and the end of your of the time that you actually are eating. So that means if I say that my eating window is possibly, an 8-hour eating window, or maybe I say it's a 7-hour eating window. It doesn't matter. We'll stick with 8 because it's easier because it's the most common. Then I would say I eat from, let's say 12 and to 8, right? And during that time, I make sure that my eating window is, 8 hours. My fasting window is 16 hours. And if at any given time I realize that my eating window is not serving me, that possibly I've hit a plateau, I'm no longer losing the fat that I expected to lose, or I feel like I'm losing it at a slower rate, or I'm not seeing any more results, then I can decide to change my fit being my food intake timeline, the beginning and the end of my eating window. And if I decide to do that, then I can change it a couple of ways. I can say, hmm, maybe it's easier for me to push my the time that I start my eating window at a later time. I think I can hold out longer if I go until possibly 2 o'clock instead of 12. So I push my eating window out 2 hours. And then I want to keep it at 8 because I know I possibly go to bed at 10 o'clock, and I want to keep a 2-hour eating window in between where I'm not eating, but I'm allowing my body to sort of break down the food before I actually sleep. And my metabolism is basically shut down, and I'm less likely to break down the food that I last ate at my last meal. So if I push it, then from 2 until 8, then my eating window is now 6 hours as opposed to 8, which means that my eating window is shorter and my fasting window is longer. So instead of having an 8-hour eating window, I now have a 6-hour eating window. And my fasting window, instead of being 16 hours, is now 18 hours. So that's sort of the shift and the slide that you can do in order to address maybe any needs that you have as you're sort of going along. If you feel as though your eating window that you currently have is not meeting the needs that you have in terms of losing fat, in terms of getting the results that you need quickly. So that's one way. You may also decide that a 16-8 or a 6-18 eating fasting cycle is not sufficient enough, that even at that time frame that you're not losing the weight that you want to lose. I would suggest that instead of going just a couple of days to test it out, I would literally wait you know a, a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, 4 weeks max, to see whether or not you notice a shift in the way your body feels. If you feel as though, I'm not talking about the scale, I'm not talking about measurement, but just how you feel. If you feel as though you can sustain that level of eating window, that it can be compressed or shortened, and you're fine with that, you feel okay, you feel like you're thriving and you're not suffering, then I would consider whether or not that's sustainable. And if it is for that period of time, then check to see if your results are that what you want. If you feel as though you've lost weight, then great. Then you know that that's good. And that's even better, because the longer the fasting window, the greater your autophagy or your cell maintenance, the greater is the increase in your growth hormone, and the greater is your likelihood of losing fat and metabolizing and stabilizing your blood sugar. So that's a good decision if you decide to stay at that, if you're thriving. Now, if you're not thriving, then I would consider possibly increasing your window again, or playing around with it just to see where you feel the most comfortable, because you don't want to be in an eating window that you don't feel comfortable and that you're not able to sustain. Now, that was the one. If you realize that you can, even because you have not been able to see any change in your fat loss, even with a 6-hour eating window, if you decide that you want to go down even further, then you can continue to compress or shorten your eating window even more. And you can continue doing it as long as you're thriving, because again, the key is sustainability, is consistency, and feeling as though you're able to continue that eating window long term, because you want to be able to continue it ongoing and not have to interrupt it because you're not able to continue it. If you have to, then you have to, but you want to choose one that you're most comfortable with. And so if you decide that you want to keep shortening it until you get to OMAD, which is 1 meal a day, then that would mean you're basically at a 20-hour fasting window and a 4-hour eating window. Because at that eating level, or that fasting window of 20 hours and an eating window of 4 hours, that's basically sort of modeling the OMAD, because within that time frame, you eat 1 meal and you're basically not hungry for the next 2 or 3 hours after you've eaten that meal within that first hour. So over a period of 4 hours, it's not likely that you'll eat another meal within that time frame. It could be that you can do that within a 4-hour period, but let's just say that you get down to a 4-hour eating window and 20 hours fasting cycle. If you do that, that's also fine. And then if you see results, even better. But the thing that you want to consider is, over time, OMAD may not necessarily be the most beneficial for you. The reason being is OMAD is good for autophagy, definitely for losing fat and for the growth hormone. So for in terms of our health and improving, the functioning of our cells and on a cellular level, it's really, really good. But on another level, in terms of maybe the mental impact, the mental mindset, or um, getting our protein in, the protein opportunity within a 4-hour eating window is reduced. And it's not the most beneficial for us as menopausal women, because we want to thrive and we want to be able to get in all of the protein we can, because we want our bodies to be high metabolizing bodies. That means we want to support muscle maintenance. We want to support muscle growth. And we can only do that when we're feeding our bodies a maximum amount of protein. And we can only do that within a certain window. You cannot feed your body a maximum amount of protein within a 4-hour eating window. So the OMAD cycle may only be a temporary cycle for a period of time, maybe during detoxing, or you're trying to experiment and figure out whether or not that cycle will be the best in terms of sort of accelerating your fat loss, because you've hit a plateau. So whatever you do, if you get to that cycle, then that should only be a cycle that you carry on for a set period of time, not ongoing, because of the reasons that I mentioned. And the other thing I want to mention is, let's see, right, the sliding window, I said in the way beginning, could be something that you decide to do because of a plateau that you hit. You're not able to lose the fat that you want to lose. And so you're thinking, okay, what can I do? And then you hit a plateau, and then you want to experiment with your window. So the sliding eating window is your individual strategy to figure it out, what window is best for me. Now, obviously, you may not be experienced with it, and you may need support and help. And I definitely can help you with it, like completely over DM or through YouTube comments or something. If you have questions, I can help you. That's not an issue if you need support with that. But if you're kind of fishing around and trying to understand how to do that, reach out. If you need help as you're on your journey. But aside from that, it's not just plateau. There are other reasons why one would want to slide their eating window, not just for fat loss, but simple reasons. Let's say you're losing weight. You're fine. You love your window. You're thriving, but you're going on vacation and you want to enjoy your vacation and you don't want to think about whether or not you're on a 16/8. What's the eating window? What's the fasting window? Because those family members or partners or friends or colleagues, whoever you're with on a vacation, you want to maybe be able to, eat with them without having to worry about whether or not you're accommodating your eating window. You want to integrate the schedule of others in your eating window. You don't want to necessarily feel as though you're, busting up the groove of other people in your vacation party. So that might be a time also where you want to play around with your sliding eating window. And what does that mean? That means, um, let's say a scenario. You are on a 16/8, or you're on a 18/6, or a 24, wherever you are, and you're going on vacation and you're like, oh, I'm feeling good. I feel good about my body. I feel good about my progress so far. I want to keep this going, but now I'm going on vacation and I kind of don't know how to keep this up without, busting up everyone else's groove, or, making it known that I'm, sort of dieting or whatever. If it's your family, it's no problem. They might be on board and you're able to, sort of accommodate that. It could also be that you don't want to, even though it's your family, disrupt the flow of the vacation mode, and you just want to kind of, enjoy it as it is and not worry about whether or not you're fasting or not. In that case, then you just choose a time frame when you're going to eat. When does your family eat during that time frame? Do you guys have like an all-inclusive when you have set meals? Or maybe you say, we're actually doing a lot of different events and therefore we're only going to eat at a certain time. And so I'm going to fast until I get to that certain time. Or maybe you say, my family's cool about it. They just want to kind of know what my deal is. And then they're flexible and they'll accommodate me. However it is, you want to make sure that you plan that into your routine, because you want to be comfortable with whatever it is you're doing, because sustainability and consistency is the key. That means if you can continue doing it, you want to make sure that whatever activity you're doing, that you don't disrupt it, or it's not disrupted by whatever you choose to implement. That means if you say, I will continue to carry on my fasting eating cycle if I know that during this particular day when we're vacationing that I can eat, from 12 until 4, and then from that point on I will abstain from food, or during that time I'm going to cut my fasting window completely out and I'm just going to eat the whole time. Whatever you choose to do, it's your decision, but you will then consider from that time, time forward, when you're going to implement your fasting cycle and eating window back in, because it's really about a lifestyle. It's really about having this window ongoing, because it is the tool that will keep you to losing fat the most effectively, right? And it will keep your health, at its optimal state, because it helps with autophagy, like I said, with the cell maintenance and the cell repair. It helps with the growth hormone, which is really important for us as menopausal women in terms of keeping our, health and our cell repair, but our cellular functioning at its optimal state. So you really want to make sure that you're doing all that you can to uphold that. And if that means that you have to step back during vacation, that's fine. You just do that. It's your decision. Nobody can come in and tell you if it's right or it's wrong. It's really your decision. And that's even better because when you make a decision and you commit to it, then you feel better as though you're really in control of how you are managing your fat loss journey and how you're managing your eating habits. And you really will feel good about it because it's something that's comfortable, it's authentic, and you feel as though it's good, that it's sustainable, and it's something that you can continue to do ongoing. Okay, so let me just check here. Jesus Junkie says Robush. Exactly. Okay, so that's the English version as well. So this is a tea that I would personally suggest for the fasting window because it is very robust. If you decide that you don't want to do coffee, for example, then this is a suggestion from me to use because there are different types that you can use. And like I said, that one for those women who have a sweet tooth, the one that has the sugar root, I'm going to find the name of this actual ingredient. Um, but it's a natural root that they have or they include in the ingredients in this type of tea, and it's very, very good. It really feels like comfort drink, like a comfort drink. It's really, really good. So it's an alternative to coffee if you want to have that during your fasting window. Again, you can drink coffee with a high fat cream. Avoid sugar. If you decide to have the sugar substitute, then that's your decision, and that's fine. In terms of calories, it's not going to necessarily add calories. It may affect your pathway, but again, like I said, experiment with it. But Robust is a really good choice. Okay. Taj Mahal says, thanks for the tip of starting at 10 a.m. for the eating window. Yes, Taj Mahal. I remember exactly. You were in the comments and you said, I've actually reduced my window to 9 instead of 10 hours. Okay, so if I understand correctly, you reduced your eating window to 9 hours instead of 10, correct? That's amazing because literally starting at, like I said, 16 hours is what, the studies show is where fat loss is the most effective and, where the benefits start to kick in terms of our health as far as autophagy and the growth hormone and, everything sort of like on a metabolic or a cellular level. But when we as beginners start with intermittent fasting, then I always suggest that you start at the 12-hour eating window. Is that the most optimal in terms of losing fat? Not necessarily. It's very slow, but it's a start. And you already notice at that level how your mindset starts to shift because oh, I'm cutting off my eating window. So at 12 hours, I can't eat anymore at the end of my FIT or my food intake timeline. So the cutoff of my eating window is, let's say, 6 or 7 or 8 p.m., and I can't eat past that. Normally, we're so used to grazing in the kitchen and eating whatever we want whenever we want. And when we say, okay, no, we cut it off here, then it's difficult, right? We go through a mindset shift. And that is very good because it helps us to really engage in understanding, who we are, what we accept, what we're able to endure in terms of hunger or not hunger or, snacking or cravings that we have. You have to actually make a conscious decision not to eat. And that is, difficult in the way beginning. So 12 hours is sort of a comfortable, level of cutting it off. And then I say then to cut it off in my free mini fat loss course every hour on a daily basis. Now, it could be that that's maybe too much. That's too extreme. For some people, it may be that you need to do it over a couple of days, so instead of 12 hours, you go an eating window 11 hours and you do it instead of over 1 day, 2 days, or 3 days it takes you in order to shut it back. And that's fine. It does not matter. It's really a matter of what you're comfortable with, what you're able to accomplish, what you're able to achieve, what's sustainable for you, and what you can accomplish, because you want it to be something that you achieve fully from your heart, and but fully from a comfort level that you can accept, that you feel comfortable with, and that you can carry on, you know, from this point forward. It's something that you really want to integrate into your lifestyle. It's something that you want to be, convicted about. And if you cannot do it, then stop. Wait until you're comfortable with a shorter eating window and then carry on. Okay. Taj Mahal, congratulations for that. I'm so happy and I'm so glad that you joined and shared that, because I'm really paying attention to all of those that leave their comments, after each video. I have it in my mind and I'm praying for all of you. I really am. And I'm so excited when I hear your results and when I hear about your authenticity and your transparency. It touches my heart because yeah, it makes me feel as though you're really engaged, you're really committed to it, you're really taking it seriously, and you're reaching out, you're making a step, you're taking a step, making action towards your goal. And it's not easy. People make it think like people assume it's like a 5-step or 6-step or a 3-step journey, but it's really a process. It takes some time to acknowledge what it is that you are reaching for, what you have to do to get there, and to engage in doing it. And when you come out and say, okay, I'm here, I'm doing it, and this is what I've done so far, and I've committed to this, I'm rooting for you. I'm so excited and I get so happy when I see your comments. And you will not believe, really, I keep you in my mind and I pray for you guys. I literally do. I think about you and I have you in my heart. And I'm so excited when I hear about the stages that you're going through. So, Taj Mahal, thank you so much for leaving that wonderful response. Okay, so Vamp357 says, I eat one meal at 5 p.m. and go to bed at 9 p.m. Okay, I started in October and will end in March. I was 165 now. Now I am 155. Great, you lost 10 pounds. 9 more pounds and go back to 16.8. Okay, so Vamp357, it sounds like you have a strategy. You're eating OMAD. So she's doing one meal a day and then she goes to bed. And I love that, at 9 p.m. Okay, so it really does depend on what your strategy is. It sounds as though this is working for her. And I like that she has a 4-hour window between the time that she has her last meal until the time that she goes to bed. She started in October and she's going to end in March. That sounds so great. And since October, she's had a 10-hour, or I'm sorry, not a 10-hour, but a 10-pound, I'm assuming it's a pound, of course, reduction in her weight. And that is amazing. And then she says that after 9 more pounds that she reduces, that she will then go to a 16.8. I too see 16.8 as a maintenance method. If you decide that you want to go, for the OMAD, and I was going to mention a few things. Of course, I'm off track already, but there are a few things I wanted to mention, sort of like the stages of what fasting you can do in order to reach your goals quicker. You can start with the 16.8. You can start even lower, like with a 12-hour eating window. That's always what I suggest for beginners who are not used to fasting and not sure about whether or not they can, their bodies accept that type of fasting or how they respond to it. It's important to know for yourself how you're able to deal with fasting. because it can have a stress effect. Your cortisol can go up depending on how long you're fasting and depending on where you are in terms of your blood sugar. If you're constantly grazing and constantly eating, then it might be very difficult for you to enter into fasting. And then doing any type of fast, whether it's 12-hour, 16-hour, or more, can be very stressful for your body. So you really want to start at a level that's comfortable for you. But what I wanted to say is that once you find a strategy that's comfortable for you, and you decide that you want to go, extreme because you've either plateaued, or it's not a matter of plateauing, but you're confident that you can handle a much longer fast. That can be a 24-hour fast. That can be a 20-hour fast in a 4-hour eating window, which seems to be the case for VAMP 357. Then in that case, you are fasting for much longer than 16 hours. And in that case, then you really are reaping the benefits of a longer fasting period. Of course, like I mentioned before, you have the health benefits, the autophagy, the growth hormone, and what have you. But there's also sort of like another impact, whether or not you're prepared for it mindset wise, or behavior wise, if you naturally go to the kitchen or not, if you're able to distract yourself and do other things, if it's a comfortable window for you or not. All those things you need to decide for yourself. But the most important thing is, if you decide to go for a shorter window and you can, and you're thriving, then go for it. If that's what brings you closer to your your goals, and you are okay with it, you're striving for it, you're ambitious, and you feel as though you're able to handle it and you can sustainably, then do it. But what I like from VAMP 357 is that she says she has a plan in place, that once she does that and she loses these 9 pounds more, then she's going to go to a maintenance strategy where she does the 16-8. So she's no longer at the level where she's doing the OMAD, which I said in the beginning may not necessarily be ideal long-term, because you don't have the protein opportunity, in order to increase your protein intake over that period of time, because it's a small window. And you really want to have a bigger window in order to have more protein intake, right? Because over 3 or 4 meals, you can do 25 to 30 grams of protein consumption, and that will get you, the protein, or allow you to hit your protein requirements, that more so than if you were to have a window that's much smaller, right? It's hard for you to hit your protein requirements if you have a smaller eating window. So that's why I recommend to not do the OMAD for a longer period of time. If it's a set period and you say, okay, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do it for a period of time so I can hit my goal. Everyone has their own needs, their own ambitions, their own goals. Then experiment with it and see how it goes for you. But to have a strategy in place and say, okay, and then long term, I'm going to go back to the 16-8, I think is phenomenal. Thanks, VAMP 357, and congratulations. It's so great that you lost those pounds. I'm rooting for you. And I'm hoping that it continues. Jesus Junkie says, okay, somehow I got that mixed up. Taj Mahal. Okay, inspirational 1. How do you know what food window is for you? I'm 50 years old and menopausal. Amen. I work from 7:30 to 4:30. I take vitamins at 1. Okay, you take vitamins at 1 p.m. I think that's what you mean. Correct me if I'm wrong. You can just throw the comment in there. Okay, so I'm 52. And I also start work. It really depends on the day, but for the most part, for my study work, I start at 7 a.m., but I'm always doing my projects earlier, starting at like 4 or 5 a.m. And my study work that I do from 7 to 4 or 4:30 is right a window that I can identify with, right? I understand what you mean with that, and I can kind of see where you're coming from. And you're wanting to know what kind of window you would have with that. And I would suggest that depending on when you go to sleep, that's when you want to start your cycle. That's your fasting cycle, right? Not really from when you go to sleep, really from when you have your last meal. But that information I don't have. But let's say your last meal was at 8 p.m. the day before, and then you're getting up at 7, but you have a 16-8. Let's say you want to start a 16-8 cycle. Then if your meal was at 8 p.m. before, then you don't want to start eating again until 12. If you're on the 16-8 window, it really does depend on what your goals are, how much you want to fast, how much you want to lose, the impact you want to have with your fasting. Because if it's a matter of reversing disease, whether you're pre-diabetic or what have you, then you want to have obviously a longer fasting window, because starting with 16 hours or so, then you're working with the decrease of inflammation, the sort of reset of your microbiome, and the growth hormone and that sort of thing. So you're getting more into the cellular impact of your fasting. But if it's strictly just fat loss, then I would say, and you haven't decided yet, let's just say that you're starting with the 16-8, then if your last meal was at 8 o'clock and then you go until 12 o'clock the next day, then already 5 hours into your day, it really does depend on what you're able to do. But with me, I wake up, I have my devotional in the morning, and then I exercise. I exercise right now like around 10 o'clock. I used to do it a little bit earlier, but right now I'm exercising at 10 or 11 even, because I want to make sure that at my first meal, I'm having the protein that I need in order to increase the efficiency of how the protein is taken up by my muscles from my workout, right? Because I did a video. That was the last video that I did. I believe that information was in that video. I have a part 1 and part 2. But I want to maximize the efficiency of the protein usage in my muscles, because I want to maintain and build the muscle mass as efficiently as possible. So I'm basing it on a number of different things. But if it's just strictly for weight loss, then I would say you have 5 hours into your workday before you start to eat. And then around 12 or 12:30, then you can start to eat. You've had then your 16-hour fast. And then starting from 12, you eat, and then you would break off your eating at 8 o'clock. But it really does depend on a number of things: your lifestyle, what your goals are, a number of different things, what activities you've got going on during the day. Maybe you eat together, maybe you have family members, maybe you have, a husband and, kids, and you eat together at 6. And so therefore, your last meal at 8 doesn't make sense. Maybe your last meal is at 6 whenever you eat together, and therefore you maybe want to push your eating window from 12 a little bit earlier until 10. It really does depend. Um, you can reach out to me directly and let me know, over DM or in the comments, and then I can answer you specifically. But depending on what your needs are, you want to sort of play around with your eating window so that it maximizes fat loss based on your daily activities. Um, Okay, did I miss that? How do you know what food window is for you? Okay. So I'm 50 years old and menopausal. I work okay, so we answered that. So Vamp357 says, I have organic tea with ground stevia leaf. Is that better than processed stevia? Yeah. Well, to be honest, I really don't know. I don't use stevia. I mean, that doesn't mean that I won't use stevia. I could use stevia. I wouldn't be opposed to using it necessarily. I just don't have it right now in my diet. I drink mostly water. I do drink other things, but as a go-to during the day, if I'm thirsty or if I'm having fluids and I'm drinking water, possibly tea, and then every once in a while coffee, decaffeinated coffee, maybe even a caffeinated coffee, but that's like once during the week or so because of the caffeine effects that it has on me personally, because of my body needs. But I'm not necessarily drinking stevia, so I don't know. But I would say if it's not processed, then most definitely it's better than the processed ingredient. But as I said before, experiment with it, see how it is. Stevia is not going to make or break your fat loss journey. In terms of your health, look into it, see if there are any side effects, but it has been accepted, and I believe FDA approved. Let me know if I'm wrong. It is on the market here, definitely in Germany where I'm stationed. And so and they're very strict about the ingredients that are on the market here. So I would imagine that it's considered to be fine, has been demonstrated and tested to be fine. So I wouldn't really trip about that. I would just say in terms of the nuances, there are certain things that can be affected or that our bodies can sort of metabolize differently and hold on to and increase our fat loss, things that we are just not aware of, that studies may not be aware of. So just monitor it, see how it affects you in terms of health and fat loss. I wouldn't really get so bogged down on that in the mind. But I would just keep it in the back of my mind and monitor it to see how you're coming along. But if you're fine until now, you haven't seen too many effects, you've been to the doctor and there's nothing impacting your values and all that kind of stuff, then I wouldn't really worry about it so much. From someone who's not taking stevia, on a regular basis. So I'm just throwing that out there. I have okay. Okay. So Taj Mahal says, is 16 your fasting window? Yeah. So when I first started off with doing the intermittent fasting, I did have the 16/8 method. Loved it. Absolutely loved it. I did it during my perimenopausal phase. Before I became postmenopausal, like I said, I'm 52. And that's how I lost the majority of my weight, literally with the 16/8. Nothing else. Like I didn't do an OMAD. I didn't do, the 24. I literally did the 16/8 and I lost a tremendous amount of weight. Now, I do remember, I have pictures during that time, and I do remember my husband did say that he thought I looked a little bit too thin for him. It just seemed for him to be extremely, too much weight because I, had developed a routine. I was comfortable with it and I had lost, a certain number of pounds and I really felt comfortable with it because I, was sort of in the zone, in the flow of it. I had the food, the meals that I had planned out and I ate them regularly. And then I ate them at certain times. And, I was distracted with my activities. So I had this whole routine set out. I wasn't concentrated so much on the food. But after a certain period of time, my routine sort of fell apart. And I then came out of the 16/8. I started to eat more of the foods outside of my nutritional plan that I had during the 16/8. So maybe more high caloric food. And then I discovered that I sort of hit a plateau. And at that time, I had to experiment with other types of windows. And although 16/8 I find to be the most flexible, the most convenient window, because for maintenance, it really is the most comfortable. At 16/8, you're still hitting those results where you are able to impact your health, but also still get into your fat stores and lose that fat as long as you're adhering to your nutritional plan. Then I really do find that to be the best one. And right now, I am pretty much sticking to that, but I do shift it up. Like over the holidays, I did do a 3-day detox, which meant for 72 hours I fasted. I did that during the pre holiday, like leading up to the Christmas holidays. And then also coming back from the holidays, I did that again. Right. So after having a lot of ingredients that I knew were maybe harmful, for my skin and all of that, I had to detox, and I used that as a method to get back on track, basically. So during that time, I was not doing the 16/8, and also it really does depend. Sometimes I do go to an OMAD, but it is not long term. It's only for a set period of time. But it's when I notice that I have plateaued, I don't see any progress, with my bloating or my weight or what have you. And I need to counteract that, what I've done maybe over the holidays or whatever. I'm just being real. So that's basically where I am right now, sort of working back to the 16/8, basically hovering around the 16/8, but not necessarily sticking to it, because I know depending on the season, I might have to shift it up. Um, Jesus Junkie says, I eat 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Is that good? Yes. Yes, girl. That is good. So that's an 8-hour eating window. That means you have a 16-hour fasting window, which means you are basically at an optimal window for losing fat and for impacting your health. And really, if you're thriving at that level, then you're fine. And you really always, depending on what window, you're eating at, you have to ask yourself that, whether or not you're thriving. If you're not thriving, if you're hungry, if you're miserable, if you're depressed, if you're really sort of out of, your skin, you don't feel comfortable with what you're eating, what you're doing, how your routine is, then I would say switch it up. You don't want to continue on with a method that you're not comfortable with, that you're not thriving in, and that you cannot sustain. Inspirational One says, thank you, appreciate. Absolutely. So grateful for all of you joining in. I actually didn't cover all of the items that I wanted to cover. I wanted to go a little bit more into, being able to switch up the eating window. I think I touched upon that, enough that you kind of get the gist. Another point that I wanted to talk about was the sugar versus the sugar substitute issue. I touched upon that in the beginning earlier than I wanted to, and I think you got the gist about that too, but I'm going to just sort of touch upon that right now very briefly, that sugar is in fact allowed. And I say that everyone has to decide for themselves how they or how their body responds to sugar. I am one to say that over a period of time, if I am eating sugar, that I can enter into a binge or spiral. And it's one that's not necessarily beneficial for me, my health, or my fat loss. And so what I tell myself is, okay, I'm going to allow myself to eat sugar for, this event, for this celebration, for this holiday, for this vacation, for this particular day or time or what have you. But long term, my goal is to really replace the sugar with natural sweeteners, with sweeteners that are not as harmful for my body and don't necessarily peak my blood sugar as sugar does. I do that for health reasons. I do that for fat loss reasons, but also for my mindset, because there was a period of time where I actually eliminated sugar completely from my diet. I did mention that in one of my lives, and also on my website for 8 months. And it was really great. I really felt the benefit of it. But once I did tap into eating sugar, I was visiting some relatives, and I had my mom and my dad and all my sisters and relatives were there, and we're eating Christmas cookies. And just had one after having 8 months of no sugar. And that started a complete spiral of binging. And from that point, my skin broke out. It was the worst that it had been for 8 months. I gained all the weight back, if not more. I was so disappointed and I felt so defeated. And therefore, that was a lesson for me that it could always be, that I decide to eat sugar or engage in, an event or a celebration. And I don't want to be in the situation where I say, oh, but I'm not eating sugar, and then I binge. If I tell myself I allow to have sugar, I may even just go to the store and say, oh, that looks really good. I really want to try what that is. And then I, buy it. I'm not going to pretend as though I don't do that or that I can't do that. What I say is I allow myself to do that, but my goal is to eat as much non-sugar foods or desserts as possible because I know that's the best for me. And if I do that, then I think that I'm more likely to stick to eating non-sugar foods more often and more and long term than if I were to restrict myself and then trigger and spiral. So, what was the question? So I say that because I'm not sure why I went off on that tangent. Okay, so let me just get back to this question. Vamp357 says, Taj Mahal, 20 hours is my fasting window. Good. Yeah, that's what you said. 5 days a week on Friday and Saturday. 16 hours is my fasting window. Okay, so you do the OMAD basically, or 20 hours fasting 5 days a week, and then on Friday and Saturday you do the typical 16-8, which is also good. That's so good. It's good to know what everyone's doing, what's working for them. I'd be interested to know, what are your results with that? Have you hit your results, or are you working towards your results, but you've noticed that it's been very effective for you? I find that good that you are reflective about how, your windows can, vary, what's comfortable for you, where you thrive, and whether or not it is good for you if you've noticed a change or a difference or a transformation. Um, there is no one size fits all. That's basically the summation of this entire live. Everyone has to know for themselves what's best for them. There is basically the eating window, the 16-8, which is the standard, and that's where you can start. You can even start, like I said, before that with a 12-hour eating window or 12-hour fasting window, because it's basically 12 and 12. But it could be that that's already too much. So just cut back. The key is to try and see how close you can get to the 16-8 and beyond in order to hit your goals. And to do that, you need to start by testing your windows. You need to set windows. You need to commit to an eating window and a fasting window, and then see how comfortable it is for you. The first time I ever fasted 24 hours, it was the craziest thing I ever did. I was so hungry and I wasn't sure if I would be able to get to the next day, because it wasn't a 24-hour fast that I was committing to. It was maybe a 3-day or a 7-day fast that I was committing to. And during that time, I was having all kinds of head, psychological issues going on. I wasn't sure if I was able to manage or get over the hump. And I said in my last live, I was looking at cookbooks to look at the food that I was going to make when I came out of the fast, because I was so hungry. I needed inspiration and motivation to get over the hump. I couldn't deal with the fact that I was abstaining from the food. But then I realized it was not so dramatic until the end. I had to get over the hump first to understand how beneficial it was, and to learn how great of a feeling it can be to know that you can obtain that and you can reach that goal. And, you're not hungry because you don't have resources. You're hungry because your body is not used to abstaining from food. So once I learned during that time period, hunger cues, what that means, what's real hunger, and if that's okay, and am I okay with it? What's my body doing? How's my body responding? It's a whole mindset thing that you go through. And once you go through that period, then you know on the other end, you're capable of doing it, and it's not a bad thing. It's a very good thing because it teaches you so much about yourself and about what you're capable of doing and how the fast impacts you and how your body responds to it. And I think that's a really good lesson in order to start your fat loss journey, because it's a quick result that you get. You definitely lose fat, but you also have a good health impact and you have a mindset impact. And then you can go into your maintenance phase knowing that you've lost the fat and you really want to just maintain it. So you're motivated to do it, and you are more careful with the foods that you feed your body. And that's really, really good, I think, as a starter for going into your fat loss journey, which is why I offered those courses in the beginning. It doesn't have to be a course. It can be the free lives that I do. The free lives that you engage in are enough to start your fat loss journey, because it's really just about knowing whether or not you can do it. You don't have to go through a course to do that. You can do it in our community. We can set up free sort of detox lives that we go through, where we're sharing with each other, how we're dealing with it, how our bodies are reacting, so that we can kind of, support each other through that process. Because it's once you get a handle of it, and once you understand how it is and how you're able to adjust or deal with it, then you are in the game. And once you're in the game, then you can kind of play around with your window. You can even do that before. You can start with an eating window of a 16-8 and then work backwards and then say, okay, or what means backwards. You can start with the 16-8 and then decide that you want to do the 72-hour fast. So whatever you feel comfortable with, wherever you thrive, that's where you should begin with understanding how you want to develop your fat loss journey and how you want to implement your fasting. Whether you have a shorter eating window or a longer eating window, you're going to play around with that. But it's really an individual process, and it's not a one size fits all. That's what this is all about. Just getting to that point where you enter into the stage, experiment with it, and understand what your body is actually capable of doing. Okay, so let me catch up here. Taj Mahal Fast went. Thank you. Appreciate. Vamp357 says, Taj Mahal is my fasting window 5 days a week. On Friday and Saturday, 16 hours is my fasting window. Okay, Taj Mahal, thanks, Vamp357. Okay, Vamp357 says, I practice fasting in the military, and I stopped once I retired, and I gained 25 pounds. So to get back to 16-8, I have one meal. It worked before when I was in the military, and it works for me now. First of all, Vamp357, thank you so much for your service. That is amazing that you are, sharing your experience with us, with what you did during that time frame and how it worked for you and how successful it was for you, and your experience that you gained 25 pounds after you sort of gave it up, and now you're getting back into it and now it's working for you. That's great. That's really a testimony, and I really appreciate that. And like to hear more about your successes. You say, of course, it worked better when I was in the military because I exercise more than I do now. And that's also another part of the whole process, how much exercise is actually necessary, to sort of kickstart our journey, or to maintain, or to offset that what we're doing. And you even say that during that time period you were exercising more. I would be interested to know how old you were at that time, because again, when we enter into the perimenopausal phase, our hormones are, sort of playing around, they're fluctuating. And that has an impact on our weight, our midsection, because our estrogen then goes down and our, fat sort of redistributes and is hovers around our midsection. And that what we did in the past is no longer as successful as it once was. And so we have to do more, or at least work smarter in order to get at those, sort of, to attack, the weight gain that we've had. And I'm curious whether or not it was a menopausal hormonal situation. You were maybe in a different hormonal stage, and therefore it worked better. Or do you think it was literally because you were exercising more at that time? I would be interested to know that. That's really good. Good input there. Thank you for that, Vamp357. Okay, so Paper Fashionista says, good day, ladies. Fasting works. Yes, amen. It does. But like you said, you have to find your most beneficial window. Yes. Also, what you eat is very important. Cutting sugar and processed foods. Yes. Yes, yes, yes. And on that note, although it's an hour and a half later, I wanted to keep it until 7 o'clock, but we're already half an hour over, but I'm going to try and keep it short. That's one of the things I wanted to mention, that what you eat within your eating window is very important. Yes, you can eat sugar because you don't want to necessarily restrict yourself. Like I said before, by saying that you're not going to eat sugar may in fact trigger a binge. For most of us in this community, because I have been reading your comments and I've been hearing from you that you say that you would rather replace the sugar than completely eliminate it. And I resonate with that. I agree with you all. It's the same for me. If there is someone who says that they completely cut out sugar or will cut out sugar or believe that they should or could or can, then share also your input. That's important for us. We want to know what is possible. But from my experience until now, it has not been possible to do so. And I think that by replacing the sugar with foods, natural sweeteners like dates and bananas and apples, and sort of modifying your desserts in such a way that you incorporate like fruits and also veggies and fiber and protein in them, so that you're not triggering overeating, but instead keeping the palatability low, because sugar actually triggers us. That it's so highly palatable that it increases our dopamine, and then we're triggered to seek that pleasure more and more. And that keeps us reaching and grazing and going in the kitchen and getting those snack foods. It's not necessary if we can sort of modify our desserts to meet our needs, to keep them within reason in terms of the palatability. They can still be very decadent and good and tasty and fulfilling without triggering us. That's really where we want to get to. I call it adult grown folk desserts, because you have to appreciate the ingredients in them in order to understand how good they really are and how good for you they really are, good for us. And I'm learning it, obviously as I go along, as I experiment with the different types of desserts that I make. What can I put in them to intensify the taste, but at the same time support fat loss and also my health? So it really does depend on how you see the nutrients that you consume, and also try, as we all agree upon, replace as much sugar as possible, because we know sugar, it's not the enemy. We know we can enjoy the foods and that it's a part of celebration and our tradition and all that. So it's not that we want to completely get away with it, get rid of it, but we do want to be aware of the impact it can have on our health, and keep it at a minimum as much as possible and replace it really with those foods that we are sure are good for us and support fat loss, but also support our health. Um, Yes, cutting sugar and processed foods. Processed foods definitely because they also, with the chemicals, can affect our hormones and our body can hold on to the fat. Angie Mobley says, I am 64 and very obese. I will experiment with this to lose excess weight and obtain better health overall. I just began an exercise routine. Angie, that's so good. You know what I say, and I have a video on this. Less is more, I think, is the thumbnail. Um, but what I talk about basically is that with your exercise routine, and I'm sure you're also very mindful of that, it has to be, something that we enjoy and that we feel comfortable with, and not necessarily this intense exercise that, all of social media is pushing us to do. It's super good to push our bodies to our potential. It's not that we want to say we're not capable of lifting weights or doing these high intense exercises. We certainly can. And I believe we're capable of doing that. It's just how do we want to, you know, be mindful of the exercises that we're doing in order to um, contribute to our fat loss. We want to make sure that we're not doing any intense exercises that raises our cortisol, that puts stress on us, that our bodies hold onto fat, because there is a hierarchy when it comes to our hormones. We have oxytocin. We have then cortisone. Oxytocin is, that hormone that we need a lot of, where it's a bonding hormone. We can build or increase our hormone when we have, sweet babies. I have two grandbabies now for my daughter and my son that were born 10 weeks within each other. And, this is time really to spend time with, one another, with the grandbabies, and really, just appreciate, the life and their development and who they are. And that really builds up the oxytocin that you have. Having dogs, having deep conversations, sex can even build oxytocin. There are a number of different deep bonding relationships or activities that you can get engaged in that actually increase your oxytocin. And this is really good because it counteracts cortisol. And cortisol is I don't want to say enemy, but it's one of those hormones that we have to be mindful of, because cortisol can really impact how our body holds on to fat. If our cortisol is high, then our insulin is high. We're not able to lose fat if cortisol is high. So we want to reduce it as much as possible. And by increasing our oxytocin, we're able to counteract the cortisol, because it basically means that we're managing our stress. And so we want to reduce the cortisol, because cortisol has an impact on insulin, and insulin in turn impacts our sex hormones, the estrogen, the progesterone, the testosterone. So we want to make sure that we are incorporating foods and exercises and activities in such a way that we're mindful of how our hormones are impacted or affected by it. Got off on a track again, but I think I covered those topics with the sugar and the sugar substitutes. I mentioned that earlier on, that they may not necessarily be the optimal food for the eating window, because our bodies don't know what to do with them. They're chemicals that our bodies are not able to break down. And so therefore we hold on to them, and then they are stored as fat. Now, that does not necessarily mean that you can't eat them. It's sort of like sugar, where we want to make sure that if we eat it, that we're mindful of it, that it's in celebration, that we enjoy it we're going to enjoy it. We're not going to pretend as though we don't and deny it and feel guilty about it. That not, but just be aware, long term. And when we accrue too much sugar, then it compounds and it can affect our health. So we really want to be careful about how much and when, and try to make sure that the majority of our nutrition is really centered around those foods that reduce refined sugar, refined flour, processed foods and chemicals, but instead stick to whole foods that our body can utilize, and that benefits our fat loss. Okay, and then the other thing is, right, I just wanted to say that the fasts vary, and depending on whether or not you want to have the intermittent fasting, with the 16/8, if you want to have the sliding eating window, which I refer to, which depends on the different types of activities or lifestyle that you're in. It could be whether or not you hit a plateau and you need to shorten your eating window, or if you're still menstruating. I didn't mention that as perimenopausal women, because we're menopausal. It's not just postmenopausal women, but it's also perimenopausal women who are still menstruating. And if you are, then it can make a difference when you fast, right? We haven't touched upon that, but that can is important. I'll just do a very quick summary that for those women who are still menstruating, make sure that you do not fast during your bleeding cycle. Once you start bleeding, make sure during that time that you're not fasting. There are two key phases when you should fast, and that's actually during the first 10 days of your cycle. Your cycle goes over 28 or 30 days, and let's say the first 10 days you can fast, and that means you can fast, whether it is the 16/8, or if you want to do even extended fasting, so 24 hours, 36 hours, or 72-hour fast, then that's also acceptable in terms of your hormone balance. But during the ovulation period, then you want to consider how your hormones are playing. Your estrogen and testosterone, they're at their peak. And so you don't necessarily want to have too much heavy fasting, but instead, the next fasting phase would therefore be during the period after your ovulation. So your ovulation period would then be, let's say, if you are then fasting from 1 to 10 days of your cycle, then 11 to 15 days would then be your ovulation period. So 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, so like 4 or 5 days. And then after 15, like 16 to day 19, then you can fast again. And again, it can be, heavy fasting, whether it's 13 to 72 hours, you can go all in because you're not bleeding. But once you hit the bleeding cycle, so from day 20 on, you don't want to fast. Okay, so for those perimenopausal women who are still fasting, who are not yet menopausal or postmenopausal, then consider that as something that you need to, you know, consider during your planning for your eating and fasting cycle. So, other than plateauing, if you're still menstruating, if you're going on vacation, if you're during the holidays, Christmas or Easter or what have you, or birthdays or celebrations, if somebody graduated from high school, or if you've been operated on and you need to have food in your system or medication that requires food in your system, then you really want to make sure that you are considering whether or not your fasting cycle or your eating window is appropriate, and you can change it up, or whether or not you should change it up accordingly. And let's see, is there anything else that I want to address? Yeah, and I'm going to end this call. There are just four things that are very important that I mentioned, or that I jotted down, that I wanted to make sure that I mentioned to all of you. And that is, when you're in your eating window, this is really important. We should keep the number of meals during our eating window to 3 or 4. That's why I think not necessarily that OMAD should be a strategy long term, because you want to make sure that your protein opportunity is at its optimal. That means you want to have 25 to 30 grams of protein for the menopausal woman whose muscle mass is decreasing 1% each year. You want to have that protein available. And so you can do that mm, most optimally when you have more meals. And you could do that when your window is greater. So at the 8-hour window, the maintenance phase, 16 hours fasting and 8-hour eating window. Also, no snacking. Okay, this sounds so bad and so restrictive, but I'll tell you this. If you have 3 or 4 meals, make sure, as a menopausal woman who has a sweet tooth, I have a sweet tooth, have a sweet tooth, I will make sure that dessert is always a part of my eating window. Always. Like, I can't think of a day. I mean, yeah, of course, there are days maybe where I go without having a dessert, but it's rare. Most of the time, I'm eating desserts because I have a sweet tooth. I want to have desserts after a meal. That's part of my eating habit. And I want to enjoy that. It's authentic, it's true to me. And so I want to uphold that and maintain that. And that's why I consider desserts to be a meal and not a snack. That means if I have 3 to 4 meals during my eating window, that if I have a meal, then my dessert is also considered a meal. So my dessert, if it's considered a meal, should contain ingredients in it that are supportive to fat loss, or supportive also for my health. That means protein rich, fiber rich, maybe even veggies in there, but definitely should be supportive of fat loss and not be food have any ingredients that trigger binging or cycling, because I want it to be something that's healthy and can be considered or carried as a meal, because I'm not using it as a snack, but instead to satisfy me, but also to nourish me. So I have during that 3 to 4 meal eating window, your eating window should be that you're eating, then you have no food and you're building up hunger, and then you have your meal again, then you're building up hunger again, then you have your other meal, and then you're building up hunger again into your last meal. So it shouldn't be that you're constantly grazing in the kitchen and getting snack foods. Otherwise, your blood sugar will remain unstable. It will continue to rise, and you don't want that during your eating window. Instead, you want it to be stable, because you want, when you switch over to the fasting window, that your fasting window will be as efficient as possible. And the only way for it to be as efficient as possible is if your body can quickly switch from the glucose pathway to the fat loss or the ketosis pathway. And it can do that when your glucose level is not completely high and blown, into the sky, but instead if it's regulated and relatively low. So you don't want to spike it or have high glycemic index foods, but instead you want to have foods that regulate your blood sugar and keep you full, stabilize your blood sugar, and are quickly able to, not quickly, because you want that they metabolize over a longer period of time. That's what keeps you full over a period of time. But you want that your body is able to switch from this pathway over to, from the glucose pathway over to the metabolic, or to the ketosis pathway. So no snacking. Count your desserts as meals. So your desserts, like I said, should contain proteins, veggies, fiber, and a moderate amount of good fat, because you want your blood sugar to be stabilized. And also, let's see. Right, sugar can be eaten, but it shouldn't dominate your entire nutrition plan. Like I said, we don't want to restrict ourselves, but we don't want to trigger ourselves into a binge or a spiral. And also, one thing, and this will be my next live next week, which is to make sure that your foods that you eat, let's say your meals, the last meal of the day, or your high caloric meals like your desserts, that they're eaten before 3 p.m. Why do I say this? Because depending on the circadian rhythm, right, for all of us is basically triggered by the light, the daylight. As the light triggers our brain to, as the day is coming to an end, and the decreasing strength of light then triggers our brain to produce melatonin, then our body will start to slow down in terms of the metabolism. And if that's the case, then you don't want to have high caloric foods in your body. Instead, you want to make sure that the last meal that you have is low caloric, and the high caloric meal that you've eaten was before 3 p.m. So at least 3-4 hours before you actually go to bed. And I think it was one of those, I think it was Vamp 357 who said that she goes to bed at 9 p.m. And she has her last meal at 5 p.m. That's great. She has a 4 p.m. window where her body has a chance to metabolize the food. She's active, who knows how active, but, she's moving around. Even if she were to sit on the couch and get up and do, things around the household, she has that time, enough time to, contribute to breaking down that food. Whereas if you were to eat your last meal at 8 p.m. and then go to bed at 9 and your body has already shut down, then your body has less time to work on the food that you last ate. So that was one of the things that I thought, as the last point would be important. So circadian rhythms and when we should eat, what we should eat, and until when is what I want to mention in the next live, which I will address then next week. See if there are any new comments. Angie Mobley said, okay, we already read that. Paper Fashionista says, lol, yes, I cut it down and ate more fruit. So it sounds she cut down sugar and processed foods, and she started eating more natural sweeteners, so fruit. And that's also what I believe you should add to your desserts, because they have a different impact on our blood sugar than, let's say, sugar does, or processed foods. Angie Mobley says, I will take in all you've shared, watch your other content, and continue to be educated. Thank you. Angie Mobley, thank you to you that you listen in and that you find the content valuable. That really humbles me and makes me happy that anyone can find value to the information that I'm providing, and that everyone is providing, that it encourages and supports us all. Paper Fashionista. So she says, glad I found you, Paper Fashionista. Thank you so much that you joined. And I'm checking you guys out too. I've been looking through to see if I can find where you guys are on social media. I'm so glad to hear from you and to address your questions, and also to share your successes and your strategies that you've shared. It's an inspiration, and it's information that we all need to know how to move forward, and to know how other people have, succeeded in their fat loss journeys. That's very important. I'm so happy that we can sort of come together on this. That's a whole purpose for this whole channel, that we can do that and share this information and, kind of grow together. Jesus Junkie says, God bless you. Jesus Junkie, God bless you. And God bless all of you who, stayed in, participated, who joined, who shared, who listened. Maybe you have questions that you weren't able to share or to provide in the comments. You maybe need some time to think about it, or maybe it comes up later. You can, because this will be sort of in the replay, share your comments below, and I will address them. If they are new, if there were questions or comments that I haven't addressed during the live, you can address me directly through my email, hersoulfit@gmail.com. So hersoulfit and then @gmail.com. And I will get back to you. I mean, I'm completely, happy about addressing any questions that you have or any issues that you may have, because we're in this all together, ladies. We want to show up. We want to be our best selves. We want to feel good about our bodies. We want to lose the fat, improve the health, and yeah, just do all that we can do from our sides to achieve the most that we can. So God bless all of you, and thank you so much for showing up. Thank you for your participation and for all of the community love. I love so much your comments and your engagement. Um, Really, I get so excited when a comment comes up and when I hear your stories and all the things. So continue definitely to respond, to share your successes or your questions, your concerns. Um, Remember, anything that you share in the group is content that I will and can use for future YouTube videos or for even for Instagram. So if you haven't already, you can go over to my Instagram page, and I have a few recipes there. I have a few tips and strategies, and whatever you guys share with me is definitely information that I can use to post content about. So you will hear from me no matter what about your issues. And, just know that I see you, I hear you, I'm reading, and so grateful and thankful about you. So I'm wishing you all the best. And next week, we will do a live coaching call about the circadian rhythms and also about an app that I want to share with you for Her Soul Fit. It's called Her Soul Plan, that you can use to track your progress. And that I will share then during the circadian rhythm live next week. Okay. So I will send an email and also a post about when that live will take place. And until then, I wish you guys all the best, and keep going with your eating windows. I'm rooting for you. I'm in the same journey, in the same boat, and I'm just hoping that you guys reach your goals. Take care, and I will see you again next week. Bye.